Unlike how the remakes of Pokémon Diamond and Pearl have garnered a pretty mixed reception, I think we can all agree that the reaction to Pokémon Legends Arceus is much more unanimous. Except for Verlisify, of course, but when has he not gone against what everyone else thinks? Anyways, the general consensus is that Pokémon Legends Arceus has amazing potential but may not deliver on its ambition unless a lot changes before release. We still don't know too much about the game, but there was enough shown in the trailer to make a lot of people worried, myself included. I'm still pretty optimistic about this game overall, but in this video I'll be going over 4 main things that Pokémon Legends Arceus needs to have in order to be successful. And when I say successful, I'm not talking about a commercial success. Pokemon games are always a commercial success. It's Pokemon. The worst selling Pokemon games still sell better than the best selling Metroid and F-Zero games combined. I'm talking about a successful game in the eyes of the core fans, a game we can put up beside Heart Gold Soul Silver, Black and White 2, and the GameCube games. We all love those games, right, Internet? Starting things off, since Pokémon Legends Arceus is advertised as an open-world action RPG, I think we need to see a good level of Pokémon AI in the wild. No, but in all seriousness, what we've seen from the trailer is pretty disappointing. Especially the first clip here where the player throws a Pokeball at a wild Shinx and the other Shinx, who I assume would be traveling with the first Shinx, doesn't even bat an eye. We've all dreamed of a Pokemon game where the world feels alive, but this interaction right here just looks like a computer object that wasn't programmed to react to something behind it. Heck, even if this other Shinx was in clear view of his buddy getting captured, I still think he wouldn't bat an eye. That's how much confidence I have in Game Freak right now. Another example is the player throwing a Pokeball at this lifeless Rhyhorn. I really hope the wild Pokemon AI isn't so bad that it makes capturing Pokemon a boring chore after a couple times. I understand that it'd be difficult to make an open world game where the Pokemon act in the same way as something like Pokemon Snap, where every move is calculated and meaningful, but you gotta do better than this, Game Freak. The AI in Breath of the Wild puts this game to shame. At least have each Pokemon run in circles or act like they're panicking when something happens. Building off the need for better AI brings into question how exactly difficult this game will be. Part of the enjoyment of open world games comes from having the freedom to approach scenarios differently than other players. You should be able to take risks, which will benefit you if successful, or set you back if you fail. That sense of learning from your mistakes is rarely found in Pokemon games these days, and is much needed in an open world style game. I'm really nervous about this one because I don't think Game Freak believes in giving today's Pokemon players a good challenge. Sometimes these kids just gotta learn the hard way.
That's a cheat move!
Welcome to the real world! Time to learn! You gonna learn today!
Right there! That, ladies and gentlemen, is a cheat move!
And it's not like Game Freak hasn't created challenging games in the past. I'm sure us older fans can recall several occasions where earlier Pokemon games at the very least made us sweat a little. If Pokémon Legends Arceus isn't at least a bit challenging, the game will feel linear, even though it's an open world, and that's because players won't be encouraged to try different approaches to obstacles that arise. I guarantee you that if the game is too easy, a ton of players will just stomp their way from point A to point B with an over-leveled Typhlosion. You know it's true. And with how easy it looks to catch wild Pokemon, thanks to the terrible AI, players will probably get bored and drop the game once they realize that your objective is to apparently build the first Sinnoh Pokédex. I mentioned earlier how we've all been dreaming of a Pokemon game where the world feels alive, and I don't think that Pokémon Legends Arceus' shift to a fully open world style game is by itself enough to make the world feel alive. The open world formula needs to be executed well, and this can primarily be done through good world building. Nobody likes an open world game that has barely anything to do in it, and from what we've seen in the Pokémon Legends Arceus trailer, there doesn't look like a whole lot to do. So far, the game looks a bit like Walking Simulator 2019, but with Pokemon scattered about. I'm hoping that Game Freak purposely didn't show us the more interesting locations in this world, similar to how Nintendo purposely didn't showcase the more interesting locations in Breath of the Wild during its pre-release advertising. Maybe there's a hidden village near the peak of Mount Coronet where the residents worship the legendary Pokemon. Maybe there's an underground mining city that once thrived in these times before it became the secret-based playground that we all know from modern Sinnoh. But right now my fear is that this world just won't contain many things to see and do in it. Even the town they showed off looks like a barren wasteland. But interesting locales isn't the only thing that makes a convincing world. A large chunk of world building can actually be done through interesting dialogue. Now we haven't seen any dialogue from Legends Arceus yet, but if we look at how most dialogue is presented in past Pokemon games, I can confidently say that this is an area which this new game can hopefully improve on. Basically, the NPCs in Pokemon games have always had the most random and oftentimes boring dialogues. They barely contribute anything interesting to the events of the game, so they generally don't feel like real living characters that would be a part of the world. Let's contrast that to a game like Trails in the Sky, where NPCs often tell interesting stories or otherwise say things that make them feel like unique, real-life characters. And even more impressively, their dialogue changes and evolves as your actions affect the events of the game. In Pokemon games, if an NPC says some random line to you when you're just starting out your journey, they'll repeat that same line to you when you come back to see them as champion. Talking about all that world building brings me to my final point. Pokémon Legends Arceus needs to have an interesting story, particularly an interesting story surrounding the god itself, Arceus. And when I say interesting, I don't mean this game needs to focus on story as much as, say, for example, PlayStation's heavily story-based experiences, but it's about time we got a Pokemon game that'll have a better story than Black and White. And while the story in those games still holds up decently well today, I think a more focused narrative on Arceus would be far more interesting. If the story in Black and White is more passive, with minor story beats mixed in throughout the adventure, I feel like with Legends Arceus we can finally have a story with bigger moments and a real sense of discovery. Arceus is a character that has barely been talked about in past Pokemon games. As a lot of you probably already know, the only way to have actually obtained the Pokemon is through a special event that was never even released. For those of you that have seen the movie Arceus and the Jewel of Life, you may be able to speculate a bit on what type of events could go down in the game. Perhaps due to a betrayal, Arceus loses faith in humanity and threatens to destroy it, bringing together Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina. Maybe your main goal, other than creating the first Sinnoh Dex, would be to recover the 17 life plates representing the different elemental types hidden across the open world. Returning them to Arceus could result in the obvious climax of the story, or maybe things could take an unexpected turn of events. As you can imagine, there's a lot of interesting directions a story revolving around Arceus could take. Those four main areas are what I believe Pokémon Legends Arceus needs to excel in for a lot of us fans to feel that the game is truly successful. Yeah, there's other things I could have mentioned, like how the frame rate and overall graphical polish needs to be improved before the game releases, but those aren't nearly as interesting to talk about since they're fairly straightforward requests. I'm just hoping that if the game isn't up to snuff by the scheduled release date, they make the all-important decision to delay it. But knowing the Pokemon Company International, I wouldn't get your hopes up.